Today I'm telling a great story about the early days of HIV, AIDS, and a courageous reporter whom I knew a little bit named Randy Shilts, who wrote a great book called And the Band Played On, which turned out to be probably the greatest book ever written about our response to HIV and AIDS, and also a model for all the problems we would experience later with COVID. Do you think we handled COVID well? I'd be curious about your comments for that, because we're going to do a future episode about COVID and how we handle it. So just to be clear, the title refers to the sinking of the Titanic. When there's an obvious great disaster about to happen, the ship's captain, in order to reassure the patients and keep them in denial, had the band play as the ship slowly sank, which everybody could see was happening around them. Randy wrote his book in 1987. At this point, it was 6 years into what was called, by some people, a very negative term, the gay plague. I'll never forget walking across the park with my golden retriever in 1981. Back in those days, I had a Sony Walkman. I was listening to the radio, listening to a song, and the announcer breathlessly broke in and said, "The CDC has identified cases where a mysterious disease is killing gay men." And within days, it was called gay-related infectious disease, or GRID, and other people called it the gay plague. And there was an enormous amount of fear and prejudice about this. A conservative commentator named Patrick Buchanan said, "This is nature's way of taking revenge on gay men and the way they have sex." He was referring to the fact that after Stonewall and Greenwich Village, there had been an enormous explosion of gay sexuality, and gay men often went to bathhouses where they had sex with anonymous strangers unprotected. And it turns out, in terms of epidemiology, these bathhouses were what's called an amplification system for the virus, where it can spread, exponentially to many more cases. So Randy's book caused some real publicity when he made an amazing claim that there was a patient zero for HIV AIDS in America, flight attendant named Gaetan Dugas, who he said had gone to multiple places around the world in bathhouses, had sex with lots of men, and single-handedly had spread the virus around the world. It turned out to be false, that Gaetan Dugas was the person who spread HIV around the world. A DNA analysis later falsified the claim because the virus had already been around the world before him. What is true is that the bathhouses were amplification systems for the virus. What is true is that by 1987, thousands of gay men had died. During the 80s, there was just an enormous amount of fear and politicization of facts about HIV. It wasn't until 1987, 86 that HIV was even identified as the germ that caused this devastating disease. There were people, I'll never forget, people in the head of the New York Review of Books who were gay and were claiming that HIV did not exist, it did not cause AIDS, and people with AIDS would not die. And they were really in enormous denial. There was a very famous crusader, which Randy documents, a guy named Larry Kramer, who was gay himself and an activist, and he went around saying, "Hey, we either have to close the bathhouses or teach people about using protection, condoms, because this is going to kill us." And he was vilified as a Puritan. Amazing, the reaction to him trying to tell the truth. It took a long time for people to understand exactly how HIV was transmitted. It turns out it's only transmitted through sex, through blood, and through mother's milk. But at the time, in the early days, people like Haitians were identified as spreading the virus just because they were Haitians. And it turned out, of course, Haitians were having sex with men and women in unprotected ways, and that's why they had a lot of HIV in their community. Another issue that it was really hard for people to accept was that blood was spreading the disease. Behind all the stigma is something we've seen in the history of epidemics and bioethics a lot, that bad people get disease and good people don't. This was, in the history of syphilis, it was enormously difficult for people to understand that a spirochete caused syphilis and not simple behavior. Simple behavior might spread the disease, but good girls could get infected by bad men and didn't mean they were bad. So in the same way, HIV was indiscriminate in who it infected. One of the breakthrough cases occurred when Rock Hudson revealed that he was dying of AIDS, and he reveals it very late. And there was also some heterosexual prostitutes who got infected. And people started showing up with unexplained HIV infection who had been in hospitals and had gotten an enormous amount of blood during surgery. And it's amazing how long it took to screen the blood, even as an indirect screen using hepatitis or HIV. Blood banks thought it would hurt them, and that people wouldn't donate blood or they wouldn't make as much money, and they resisted for a long time screening the blood. And Randy, in his book, tells this story. It wasn't until Stanford started screening this blood, and there were a lot of gay men donating blood in the San Francisco Bay Area, that other blood banks started to follow suit. And a lot of people died needlessly because the blood wasn't screened soon enough. In France, they waited 6 months after the United States started screening because they wanted their own French test, and almost every hemophiliac in France got infected and later died. The officials who made that decision, actually 2 of them actually went to prison. Randy documents how a Frenchman named Luc Montagnier really discovered the HIV virus and its causative role in causing AIDS. Montagnier actually listed an American named Robert Gallo as the co-discoverer. And that's an interesting story. There was an enormous political battle as to who can be first. We've seen this desire to be first permeate medicine before, like with the first heart transplant. Gallo had made a lot of patents in the United States for testing that was going to be very lucrative. And he offered Montagnier a share of those patents if he could be listed as a co-discoverer. And Montagnier agreed. Later at a talk in Birmingham, Montagnier revealed that it was one of the big regrets of his life that he had listed Gallo as a co-discoverer. And a couple of years ago, Montagnier actually died. Going back, the amount of fear and prejudice was just astonishing in the early days. I once invited Randy to give a talk. I think it was in Sandestin, down on the Gulf Coast. He was a great speaker. It was very moving the way he humanized the virus and its toll on people and their families in the same way that Abraham Verghese did later in a great book called My Own Country. In my own life, it became very important to just stick to the facts about HIV and AIDS and not facilitate rumors. There were crazy rumors like a gay waiter could spit in your salad and give you AIDS, or that mosquitoes could bite a gay person and then bite you and you would get infected. It was all proven to be false. I actually got involved. It became a kind of personal issue for me. I became involved with Birmingham AIDS Outreach, which was the largest charity organization at the time. I later became chair of the board of directors and helped found something called A Baby's Place, which was for unwanted HIV babies. And the money just poured in for the AIDS babies. It was astonishing. It was like a tsunami of money. And med students and undergrad, we were all volunteering at this house. It was really an incredible response from the community. And we had some amazing fundraisers, like Joan Rivers, other people like that. Later, when we tried to start a similar house for teenagers, especially teenagers of color with HIV, so really any money came. So there was an enormous differential in how people responded and perceptions of innocence. And of course, everybody is innocent in terms of getting a virus, something we'll talk about later when we talk about COVID. Unfortunately, Randy later revealed that one of his motivations for investigating all this and telling these stories was that he himself had HIV. He later died of HIV and AIDS. The book remains one of the great reads about how institutional bickering and delays. President Ronald Reagan never mentioned AIDS, even though his own son was gay. Anthony Fauci, at the time, turned out to be a hero. He finally listened to gay activists who wanted to self-experiment, who wanted to speed up retroviral medicines like AZT. Randy told all these stories. It's a long book, but it's a great book. It has a lot of great stories. I hope you read it one day. That's it for today. I hope you like this story. If you do, give me a thumbs up, ring the bell, subscribe. Thank you.